Good morning, everybody. My name is Alicia Moran, and I'm the manager of small business services here at Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation. I want to welcome you to our Pathways to Growth and Expansion. Today's topic is Land Use Matters, and this program and the series is being sponsored by Lerch Brewer. And we want to thank them as our sponsor for this program and all the great programs we're doing in this series. Next slide, please. We're going to be recording this session, and please know that you can put your questions into the Q&A and you can introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like. Again, my name's Alicia, and here's my contact information. Next slide, please. So the Pathways series, we've held a variety of Pathways programs, Pathways to Financial Management, Pathways to Procurement, and now this series, Pathways to Business Growth and Expansion. We are trying to help our business community reach and get to resources that will help them grow and expand here in Prince George's County. So we thank you for joining us here today. Next slide, please. The Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation hosts a variety of programs to help our business community, from Takeout Tuesday to these Pathways series, our business spotlights. And right now, especially important is our Buy Prince George's program. If you are a local Prince George's County business, we want you to register in the Buy Prince George's portal and make sure that you are supporting other Prince George's County businesses and buying locally. Next slide, please. The EDC, Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation, is really here to help all businesses, whether it's helping them do strategic planning, site selection, providing economic and demographic data, helping them find space for their new business, helping them with permitting assistance, helping them with, again, we're working with companies to help here and help to grow them here and help our local businesses grow and expand here. So we do everything from problem solving to a host of things, including educational programming like you're taking part in today, as well as networking programs. Next slide, please. So the team here at EDC, I'm again, Alicia, the manager of small business services, but as you see, we have a team of people here all to assist you. We have experts in technology, experts in manufacturing and construction, experts in government contracting, finance, healthcare, retail and restaurant, and large projects, as well as international trade. So you have a great team of experts here at the EDC, and I encourage you, if you don't know the team here at EDC, please join us, get to know us, and work with us, because we want to work with you. Next slide, please. Some of the small business services we provide, we're seeing behind me Innovation Station, which is our collaborative co-working space and business incubator, which is managed by the Economic Development Corporation. There are many other incubators within the county, MTech over at the University of Maryland, you have the Innovation Hub over at the Prince George's Community College, and you also have the Bowie BIC and the Bowie Living Learning Center, Entrepreneurship Center at Bowie State University. We partner with all of those resources. We also partner with our resource partners through the SBA funded partners such as SCORE, SBDC, Small Business Development Center, Maryland Women's Business Center, and we partner with financing partners like TEDCO, the Technology Development Corporation, FSC First, and other banking and lending institutions. So just know, from small business services to large, we're here to support you. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Some of the other programs we participate in are supporting is the Global Entrepreneurship Week, which is happening next week. We have a First Friday coaching series. And if everybody does not know this, you should know that during the COVID pandemic, the Maryland School of Business has actually created a Maryland Reboot program. And this is a program where individuals can take advantage of programming covering finance, marketing, and a host of other business resources. So if you did not know about that, please take advantage of that. Next slide, please. If you want more information on the Pathways program, I would just say that you can contact either Crystal Ballard or myself, and just know that the pathway slide and the link there gets you to the Pathways portal. You can also find the next upcoming programs on the EDC calendar of events website. We have Spanish language programs as well as English language programs, and we'll have a series that will run throughout the end of 2021 into 2022, covering everything from permitting and finance and marketing and much more. So please join us for other programs. Next slide. And here again, our next upcoming program is in Spanish, and that will be held on November 18th. The next English speaking program will be held on December 9th. Please join us and take a look at our website for our upcoming programs. Without further ado, I'd really like to turn this program over to John Mason, where we're talking about land use and the importance of how the EDC works with the developer community, the real estate community, and our business community to help them in this process, as well as with our partners over at planning and with other partners within the ecosystem that supports the land use process. Thank you very much. Next slide. I'm turning it over to John Mason now. John, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alicia, and good morning to everyone. We thank our audience for joining us, and we are very excited about this opportunity to really disseminate this super important information to county-owned businesses, or those of you that may be contemplating a physical expansion project. Some of the things that you will learn today are critically important to that process. Today, we've got some incredible panel speakers that are going to talk about a lot of technical and legal aspects of doing an expansion or a physical relocation. And I think you will be very, very impressed with what they have to say, and also as well as being informed. So we thank Lerch Brewer, our sponsors, and our other dynamic speakers that will be coming after me. I want to say that this is a two-part series. And the first part of it, I want to reference a few things that we discussed, and then we're going to drill down a little bit more specifically about zoning and land use and that sort of thing. Today, I think with regards to legal and technical, it's important to understand that some of the requirements that you may have to adhere to lack subjectivity. In other words, it's the law. You have to abide by the statute and what is already in place with regards to zoning and with regards to land use, permitted uses, and things of that sort. And so in many cases, there have been companies that have made investment decisions, albeit land or in buildings, and have not really gone through the process of getting the correct information and extracting the data that's needed to make those decisions, and then have gone into that whole transaction, invested money, and then find out later on that you're not able to do exactly what you thought you'd be able to do with regards to land use and the legal aspects of, what's required for you to set your business up there. So we want to help you to avoid that, so that you truly understand exactly what needs to be done and who are the important stakeholders, who are the resources that you should call upon, albeit land use attorneys, folks from our planning and zoning department, so that you have the correct information before making a huge investment in a physical expansion. So this is critically important. So let's go on with our slideshow. If you turn that slide. So we talked about on October 14th, many of the factors that go into, as I mentioned, making a decision for a new site. And you can see many of the bullets. What I did here was I highlighted what we really want to get into today, real estate availability. And that's kind of an area that the EDC can help you with, along with the real estate brokerage community, and kind of determining what's out there. What kind of land assets do we have in the county in terms of our inventory that you can buy or acquire so that you can set up your new location. Permitting and zoning, critically important in those requirements. Also land use. So these are the important things we're going to talk about today. You can turn that for me. Next slide, please. So land use requirements are a part of a geographic project list that you can see here that really determine exactly, can I do what my business is created to do on this particular parcel of land? Is it legal? Is it logical? Does it fit within the community dynamics? Are you a good corporate citizen? Are you able to mix in with that community from a business standpoint where everyone is happy? And so when you talk about land use requirements, if you look at it from a global standpoint, there are a lot of factors that have gone into where businesses can do what, even before you make a decision as to where you might want to go. So next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about that. So I talked about in the 8 steps in that first series, the 8 steps in deciding or bringing together all of the important factors in making a decision. And the one thing is creating a team of people that will be important, well, they have specific areas of expertise that they are working in to help you go into that decision or make that decision. And so when you talk about land use and planning, there are some individuals with certain skill set in the way of representatives from the planning department, land use attorneys, civil engineers, architects, certainly commercial real estate brokers, peer review professionals, which you may not understand what that means, but we're going to go into it a little bit later. But these are all the folks that are really involved with working with you, looking at your plan, looking at the scope of your expansion project to determine, can I do what my business is created to do in this area? Next slide, please. Certainly, we talked about in our last series, the commercial real estate brokerage community that utilizes tools like a CoStar, which helps you to identify what land is available on market. But we also have tools that help you identify what's available off market. And the EDC kind of specializes in that too. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So next slide. This is a tool that we use that determines where the proper zoning land assets are. And I think James is going to go into this a little bit later on. James Hunt, who is one of our speakers from planning today. But we use this to determine what the existing zoning is and what the proposed zoning will be. And when I say proposed, many of you probably know that the county has gone through a new countywide mapping amendment, which will take many of our zoning codes down to a less amount of zoning codes to give you a real idea of exactly, where you can do what. And so that's something that's really going through the process of approval now. So we have some zoning codes that are in place, some of which are going to expand, some of them are going to change. And so we have a tool here, a mapping tool, that allows you to see what the proposed zoning is and the existing zoning. That's one tool that we use. Next slide, please. And then there's, of course, what we call PG Atlas. And this is a program that is it's actually, all of these programs are available to you on the web, and we can send you these links. But PG Atlas allows you to put in an address for a particular parcel or building and what have you, and get tons of data about that particular parcel, inclusive of the zoning and the infrastructure that's already there. And so when you use this tool, it kind of gives you an ability to, before you really go too far into determining where you want to go, as to whether or not this site may be feasible for you. Again, that's pgatlas.com is a tool that we use also. It's available on the web. And our next tool that we use is, next slide, please. Program that we have, it's called Land Vision. And Land Vision pretty much does the same thing. And it gives us a lot of data on that particular parcel. Also gives us information about ownership and historical data on transactions, things like that. And we can layer a lot of different things onto these maps, inclusive of wetlands areas. So, for example, you see the encircled area, the green encircled area there. If there is a wetlands part of that particular parcel that we have identified in the green encircled area, then we can drop a layer in there. You can see over to the right where it says ROS, which is residential open space zoning. There's the little slithers of that greenery, and that's where wetlands are in that particular case. But for example, if there was a wetlands issue in the encircled area there, we'd be able to determine that. You would know, oh, well, wait a minute, I don't think I can put a building there. There may be an issue there. So these are sort of the kind of things you want to have already identified before you even begin to embark on a transaction to do a purchase or acquisition of land. Next slide, please. So those are some of the tools that we use. So after you've done your full analysis of all of the sites that you have on your list, and you've come down to what's called a short list of sites that meet those requirements, and you've studied that, and your group and your team have kind of agreed on, hey, there's 3 sites out of 10 that we started with that we would really like to determine. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. You can conduct those site visits like we talked about and determine all of the factors that go into the decision. Certainly you need to go and see those sites. Next slide. And then you want to convene a group of all of the stakeholders that are involved from a public and private standpoint. So what we do with the EDC is we help you to bring these groups of people together. And they may be from the planning department, they may be from zoning, maybe from WSSC water, fire, they may be from the what's called soil conservation district. All of these people come together and they look at the scope of your project before you even, in many cases, buy the land to determine, can I do that here? Is everything in order that will allow me without a hitch to acquire this land, put my building up, and be ready to get it built and turn the key and what have you. So lots of factors go into it. If you're on a site that is already populated with trees, there's tree harvesting. There's a lot of things that go into everything that happens before you get what's called a detailed site plan approval, which James is going to talk about in a little while. And then you go on to grading that site, making it nice and flat and clean so that you can put the shovel in the ground and start digging into that. So you look at stormwater management design, you look at traffic studies, all these things. And all of these folks, we want to bring them together important to this whole process. Because once you decide that you want to begin that transaction of doing acquisition from a financial standpoint, you want to be sure that you have everything in order. Next slide, please. And you want to have all that together before you get to this particular slide. What you have here is a group called the District Council. And imagine yourself as a person that is speaking to the district council about your project. Lots of questions come up. Many times at these district council meetings, public hearings, you have people from the public, the community that's concerned for whatever reason about maybe you going there. You have support, and in some cases you may have the opposition. And so it's up to you and folks at Lerch, Brewer, planning department and what have you, all these stakeholders to make the compelling case that where you want to locate your business is going to be good for the community, that you're going to be a good public citizen or a good corporate citizen rather. And so before you get here to this forum, you need to make sure you've got everything in order so that you can make that compelling case and get an approval that you might be able to put your building here and begin to do business here and hire great people in Prince George's County to work here. And everything that goes into that conversation about economic development, and growing our community and becoming a healthier, wealthier, and wiser community because the economics are robust here in Prince George's. So this is very general in kind of setting up our next two speakers, because they're going to go into a lot of discussion about technical and legal. And we have here a person that we deal with a lot. His name is Mr. James R. Hunt, and he is the Planning Division Chief of Development Review Division for the Maryland Capital Park and Planning Commission. And we actually meet with James and his team and all the people that you saw around the table many times with you as a client to determine, are we on the right track? Are some things that we need to consider? So James, it's pretty much on you now. You can take it away and give us some good technical discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, good morning. Thanks, Mr. Mason, and good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here before you today to kind of go through the whole development review process, as well as to provide you some more information about the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, as well as the planning department. Next slide, please. So, and you go to next slide, please. All right, so real quick, I've got here a brief overview of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. The reason why I wanted to kind of go over this today is because, as I know for myself, when I moved to Prince George's County, I really didn't understand the relationship between Maryland National Capital Park and Planning and the Planning Department, the Parks and Recreation Department, as well as the county agencies themselves. So here we have the commission itself, which is formed the commission is formed with two planning boards. You have the Prince George's County Planning Board, and you also have the Montgomery County Planning Board. They come together to form the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. The commission was actually formed back in 1927 by the state of Maryland to handle all the parks and recreation services, as well as the planning services for the Washington, D.C. metropolitan or suburban area on the Maryland side. Also within the Prince George's County, as far as on the Prince George's County Planning Board side, obviously, like I said before, we have the Planning Department as well as the Parks and Recreation Department. For Montgomery County, they have the Planning Department, but they have a Parks Department. They don't have recreational services offered by Maryland National Capital Park and Planning. The county of Montgomery actually handles those services for them. So next slide, please. And within the planning department, we have our own planning director, obviously. Her name is Andre Green-Checkley Esquire. We have two deputy directors, one over operations, which is Derek Balaj. Also Suzanne King, who manages the administrative side of the department. And more so whenever for you all as small businesses, when you're interacting with the planning department, you're probably going to come in contact more so with the countywide planning division, the community planning division, as well as my division, the development review division. Next slide, please. Going into the countywide planning division, they actually are what we call they handle all our functional master plans within the county. Those plans can include green infrastructure plans, transportation plans, historic preservation policies, and also special projects. And those special projects primarily are what we call mandatory referral, or on those projects which have more so an impact to public facilities. So whenever you see like school facilities being built or requested to be built, also you see any type of government buildings, certain properties are requesting a sewer and water service area upgrade to provide services to a particular property. Those reviews actually occur within the countywide planning division. Next slide, please. And also we have our community planning division. That particular division handles a lot of our master plan conformance or reviews related to conformance for those plans. So all the plans such as what we call Plan 2035, which is the master plan or the overall general plan, I should say, for Prince George's County and how the county wants to grow. They also work on specific master plans and sector plans, which are the smaller area plans that you actually find out, such as those areas around, let's say, National Harbor, the areas over in Largo, the Prince George's Plaza, and also, let's say, Route 1 or College Park, those areas, Greenbelt. We have a lot of small little master plans and sector plans throughout the county, which the Community Planning Division works together to formulate those plans, and they work with the county agencies and also a lot of community input on those plans as well. Within that division, we have our placemaking section, the neighborhood revitalization section, as well as a long-range planning section. Next slide, please. And then you have the Development Review Division, which is the division that handles a lot of the entitlement cases that actually occur within the planning department, and also eventually may go over to the zoning hearing examiner's office, as well as on up to the district council. Within the Development Review Division, we have our Planning Information Services section. This particular section is very important to not only to the planning department, but also throughout the county. They're basically your first point of contact when you want to get more information about a particular property or building that we have. For them, they're primarily providing you information on that property related to planning and zoning on that property. If you're wanting to get history of a building, such as use and occupancies and those other types of things, you actually need to contact the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement. However, we work very closely with that agency and any other agency throughout the county at the same time. Next, we have the application section, which is the actual section where you actually form and provide and submit various applications to the department. They do a thorough review on those applications to make sure everything's there and ready to go for the next stage in the process, which is going to be your, as far as the actual reviews from those other agencies or those other sections coming forward. And what I'm going to talk about a little bit later are the next few sections, which are more so the zoning section, the subdivision section, and urban design, and then on into permit review. The zoning section, and this is basically almost like a layer that we're having to discuss and build here. So when you first go to a property, you make sure the property is actually zoned properly for what you want to do and what you're requesting to do there. So they're going to do that. And there are also some various requirements. You may have to get a special exception. You may have to get a zoning map amendment and departures, things like that. And those particular requests are handled through the zoning section. Next, we have our subdivision section, which I'll go into a little more detail later. That zoning section handles the preliminary plans of subdivision when you're basically next trying to break up the land. So let's say if it's a single family home development or a townhouse development that wants to come in, you have to get a subdivision approved, where at that point in time, like I said, you're breaking up the land. And also that's when we're actually, the county and the planning department are requesting information on what we call adequate public facilities. We need to ensure that the development is being provided adequate sewer, water, police, fire, and school services to that particular development at that point in time. In addition to that, there's also environmental reviews that take place, as well as transportation reviews that take place. Next, we have urban design. Now you're getting to the point where you're actually seeing the building come out of the ground and you're seeing the architecture and the design, landscaping, things like that. So that's what that particular section is actually reviewing for at that point. And then last but not least, you have the permit review section, which they are, part of them are actually housed over the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement over in Largo. Their task is actually to review the actual permit, may it be a building permit, use and occupancy permit, whatever that may come through, to ensure it conforms to the prior entitlement, such as the site plan that's taken place, preliminary plans that have taken place, and also any type of zoning applications, such as the special exception I was talking about earlier. We want to ensure that they comply with those particular plans and the codes as well at that point in time. Next slide, please. So here we have the zoning map amendment. So zoning map amendments are basically when you need to change, when you want to request to change the zone on a property. So if a property is zoned for residential single family, you want to change the zoning to a commercial property, you have to, in essence, prove what we call a change or mistake, which basically says you have a significant change in the property, or in the neighborhood, I should say, or there was a mistake in the zoning when it was applied at the time. So, and there's a process behind that usually takes about 8 to 10 months. You have to provide a pre-application notice that takes place to the community. The application is submitted with a package, such as, you provide the request, the area that's being requested for the new zone. Also, after that's submitted and acceptance takes place, then we also send out referrals. Referrals are requests for information from various other agencies, such as the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement, our transportation section, the environmental planning section, subdivision, whoever else may be involved in the review. They look at it at that point in time. After those referrals come back in, then staff gathers those referrals, and we then do a technical staff report, which is an analysis of all that information that's come in. And we provide that information back to the planning board. And the planning board will review at that point in time that analysis is taken place by staff, and then will request to probably transmit, not more so transmit, not shouldn't say probably, but to transmit over to the zoning hearing examiner. The zoning hearing examiner will then have a hearing on that particular case And then it may go on to the district council, where they will either request to have what we call an oral argument, where the applicant at that point in time will stand before the district council and argue their case before the council. And then and both times before the planning board, the zoning hearing examiner, as well as the district council, the citizens have an opportunity to speak, but they have to register themselves to be a person of record, as well as register to speak at the same time. So, and there's an option where the district council may not even request to hear the case. It may be a simple case where they say, okay, we don't want to hear it. We just, we'll go ahead and stamp it approved and move on. We've seen the information's been provided. We agree, we want to move on. Next slide, please. Also, as another aspect of zoning is a special exception. And a special exception is just like we have on the screen here. It's a use of property that is allowed by a zoning ordinance under specific conditions. So it may be something to where the applicant, it may not be, outright permitted, but there may be some impacts that could potentially happen to the community. And there needs to be an analysis and review that takes place on those potential impacts. Such as we may have a situation where a gas station may be next to a residential community. By zoning, it's allowed with a special exception. Then that would say that staff would need to review that analysis and the information provided and get that information onto the planning board as well as to the district council. Next slide, please. And along with all of this, of course, this is the actual process, which is also stated on the prior screen here. The application is accepted by the planning department. We notify the zoning hearing examiner within 7 days. It is within the code that we notify the zoning hearing examiner within 7 days. Referrals are then sent to all the stakeholder agencies to let them know that that application has been submitted to staff to get their feedback on the application. And then after that, the technical staff report is produced. And then once that's produced, it has to be published 2 weeks prior to the planning board hearing on the website to ensure everyone has proper time to take a view at that the application package and the staff report and the presentation itself. The planning board then, for a special exception, they will not hear a special exception. What they will do is they will vote to transmit that information onto the zoning hearing examiner. The zoning hearing examiner, they are the body, that's the body in which the public hearing will take place. After the zoning hearing examiner holds their public hearing, then that particular special exception goes on to the district council for their review and analysis at the same time they're ruling, ultimately. Next slide, please. So then we are talking about what I was talking about earlier, the subdivision. So subdivision is where the county council and the county executive, they've adopted specific subdivision regulations where we have to, the county has to abide by to ensure proper breaking up of the land, so to speak. This, like I said here, is a division of large parcels into smaller properties. You can eventually sell it or develop that particular property at the same time. They also delineate suitable building sites, lots, protects also environmental sensitive areas. And like I was saying earlier, it also does a full analysis and assessment on adequate public facilities. Types of applications related to preliminary plans of subdivision are preliminary plans. You have final plats. Final plats are actually what homeowner, if you're a homeowner, you will get an actual plat that's provided to you at your settlement. So that's an actual copy of your border of your property itself. And so we have to have that, those particular final plats have to be reviewed by staff and provided to the planning board for the chair to sign off on. And then also those go on to be recorded within land records. Also, they review vacation petitions. So if someone of their property wants to vacate a portion of their property, then they have the opportunity to do so through a vacation petition. Next slide, please. And then within the preliminary plan process, it mirrors a lot of the other processes we were talking about earlier. So the pre-application notices goes out. Those are particularly where the applicant notifies the adjacent property owners, any registered civic associations in the area, and any persons of record on prior cases within the past 10 years. They notify those folks to let them know we've submitted this application package. If you have any questions, please notify the applicant. Here's their information. If they have the opportunity to meet with the applicant, things like that. The application actually is also referred out to those various other agencies like we did with the other cases. Then what we have here, we have the Subdivision Development Review Committee. So that committee is basically planning department staff, as well as folks from the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, or WSSC. the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement. You may have folks from the Health Department there, as well as the Department of Public Works and Transportation, and other agencies, police and fire, will show up as well to provide their initial comments on that particular development application. After we receive those comments from those development application from those agencies, then staff again will produce a staff report, their analysis, whether they recommend approval with conditions, or recommend disapproval of the application, and do go to the planning board for a public hearing. What's the unique part about the preliminary plan of subdivision is that it does not go to the district council. The district council, they do not review preliminary plans of subdivision. After the planning board makes their ruling on a preliminary plan of subdivision, any person of record can vote to appeal, or can go and appeal that particular decision to the circuit court. It will not go to the district council for review at that point. Next slide, please. So next one is the site plan phase, and I don't want to kind of bore anybody on that, but this is the phase where everyone really wants to get involved in the process. They see the architectures being taken place. Here you see the conceptual site plans, the detailed site plans, the comprehensive design plans, as well as the specific design plans. Excuse me, these are all different types of site plans where you're going to see a lot of the architecture. Next slide, please. And in this particular slide, you see it's very similar to the other slides where we're talking about the pre-application, the application, referrals, technical staff report, the planning board. However, with this one, it does have the opportunity to be called up by the district council for their review at the same time. So they can appeal it, or the council can decide to review it. So at that point in time, they can do that. Next slide. Now we go on to our permit review section, which they are strictly a referral agency only. So to clarify, the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement are over the issuance of permits. We are only there as a referral agency, to provide comment on those particular applications when they come through. So we are not the deciding agency on that. We provide facts on there to say, hey, they are in conformance with their prior entitlement approvals, such as the subdivision or site plan approvals or conditions on those particular approvals. But ultimately, the issuing authority on that is the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement. They have overriding authority on that at that point. So, for example, with the grading, building, use and occupancy, and sign permit that's being issued, they can issue that without even sending that to our agency. Typically, they don't. I want to be clear on that. Typically, they don't, because they rely on us just like we rely on them on our referrals as well. Next slide, please. All right, and this briefly is basically an overview of what we were talking about earlier. So decisions made by the zoning hearing examiner or district council, or those zoning map amendments we were talking about earlier, special exceptions, variance requests as well. So if there's something where someone can't, for some reason, meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance, then those applications or those requests are actually provided and heard by the zoning hearing examiner and possibly the district council as well. And other development applications that require planning board and are subject to those district council reviews, again, minor revisions, special exceptions, certifications of non-conforming uses, those are zoning applications as well. So for example, if you as a small business want to look into a particular property and found out that, hey, let's say you're wanting to propose continuing a grocery store, and a grocery store that was there beforehand left, and it was deemed we call a non-conforming use, where the zoning ordinance said on this particular property, it's a non-permitted use. Well, in essence, if the grocery store was there before that law was in place, then it's deemed a non-conforming use. Now, if they stop business and stop operating after a certain period of time, then that non-conforming use goes away, and they have to that non-conforming use is there, but they have to, the new person or the new business that wants to go in has to come in and request to be certified as a non-conforming use. In essence, they have to prove that the business or that type of business has not stopped operation for more than 18 months. So at that point in time, they have to prove their case before both the planning board as well as the district council. We review those applications on a piece by application basis. So we look at the information provided to us, and there's a lot of information on that. So I want to be clear. I know that's a big question for a lot of small businesses wanting to go into places because of the fact that they want to provide a lot of it, or want to go in some place that may be a little bit easier to kind of get in. Next on there, we have our comprehensive design plans, such as we talked about earlier. Those particular plans are basically by the comprehensive design zones. So they're site plans that are in a particular area that already have requirements as well. And a few other things I wanted to talk about before I leave here and hand it over to our team over at Lerch, Brewer. We were talking about earlier, I want to make sure that you all are aware that you can contact our planning information services team. Please feel free to do so. My information is on the prior slide earlier. You can contact me, I can give you their information. Also, we have a pre-application meeting that's already set up for a lot of folks. If you need to submit an application to us, you can meet with the entire team to go through that, and then we can go from there. And last but not least, there is the swipe tool, which provides a lot more information that Mr. Mason was talking about earlier, and gives you more information regarding the new zoning ordinance, as well as subdivision regulations as well. Also, if you have any, like I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be here, no problem. So I'll go ahead now, without further ado, to hand it over to our team over at Lerch, Brewer. We have both Stacy and Vincent here, and I'll hand it over to them.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us today. As James mentioned, Vince and I are land use attorneys with Lerch, Brewer, and Lerch has 15 land use attorneys that practice in both Prince George's and Montgomery counties. And we do work with small businesses, with developers that are doing mixed use developments, those that are doing retail, residential, institutional, and industrial type uses as well. And we're thrilled to be here today to talk to you a little bit more about what James and John have dug into in terms of the land use review process. Both Vince and I we really love what we do. Besides kind of our day jobs, I'm actually an adjunct professor at GW Law School, where I teach a land use class. Vince has his law degree, but also has his planning degree as well. So we like to draw upon these various aspects of our background to help our clients as they're digging into a case. As John and James both mentioned, one of the most important aspects, and we can go to the next slide, one of the most important aspects of looking at a property is identifying the background information about what you can and cannot do. And it's so important to do, as both John and James mentioned, of creating a team of folks that can really give you that background information. And we can go to the next slide. What we're planning on doing today is providing you with some insight in terms of how to best navigate through the development review process, as James talked about it. As you saw, it's a very lengthy process. It's complex, and you really do need to get the right players involved to help you get through the process in the most efficient way as possible. So what we're going to talk about today is about zoning ordinance analysis. That's particularly important today because of the fact that there is a zoning ordinance that is basically been created and will become in effect early next year. And you need to be looking at properties both under the current zoning ordinance and the current zone, as well as potentially applying for a new zone that's going to be in effect. Vince is going to talk a bit about the pre-application meeting and coordination process, how you best can navigate that process that James talked about. And then we're going to talk about staggering entitlements for timing and efficiency. The last thing we'll do is provide a case study that we worked on for CVS to provide you with some insight of how it actually applies to a specific situation. Next slide. So again, as we mentioned, it's kind of a unique time right now in Prince George's in the sense of the fact that you need to be looking at both existing zones and new zones. So in the county, almost every property is being proposed to be rezoned to a new zone. And so what's important during that process? What's important is to evaluate what is the best zone for which your project should move under in terms of development. To give you an example, we're working with an institutional user that is medical in nature. They're doing an expansion of an existing use. And we needed to dig in to figure out whether the current zoning or the future zoning made the most sense. And it's complex. You need to actually have an engineer evaluate both the development under the current zoning, as well as what the zone will be in the future, because your review is could occur under either one. Currently, there are two different ways in which one has the ability to decide whether to apply under the current zone or the new zone. So if you have an existing property and an existing development, and you are in effect doing an expansion, you have the ability within a 2-year window of the effective date of the zoning ordinance and the CMA to basically decide which zone is most advantageous to you. So in our situation, we determined that the existing zone was actually more advantageous than the new zone. And the reason is because we had an existing development that was built under old standards, and it was too complex, and the scale of what we would have to do to comply with the new zone just did not make sense. So we really did take time to figure this out. And it's going to save us a lot of time in the review process. And to what John was saying, when we get to the planning board, we want to make sure that all the issues have been worked out, and we're on the same page with staff. The second process is if you have a brand new site, you've identified a site that you're interested in, and you have determined that the existing zone really makes more sense for you. The zoning ordinance that's proposed, that should be adopted after the beginning of the year, allows for the planning director to assess whether or not you qualify for utilizing the existing zone. The challenge with the new zoning ordinance is it's not been applied yet. So there's a lot of uncertainty as to how these various processes will come into place. And so some developers are deciding, listen, I don't know exactly what the planning director may say. And so I'm just going to go with developing under the new zone. So again, it's just kind of an unusual time right now, because you have to look at two different zoning ordinances in your evaluation. Next slide. I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague, Vince Biazzi.
Thanks, Stacy. So in addition to that initial zoning analysis and kind of deciding which zone is more advantageous throughout the CMA process and the 2-year period following adoption of the new ordinance, we advise our clients to engage in what's called a pre-application meeting, which James described a little bit in detail. Development Review instituted this new virtual forum last year during the pandemic so that development teams could meet with staff prior to submittal of an application with a courtesy review to provide some feedback on potential issues and ideas on how the application could move through development review a little more smoothly. This is pretty much the formal kickoff to the development review process. Even if there is some engagement with staff on the front end, this is an opportunity for development teams to identify potential issues and shore up an application prior to submittal. Typically, we like to invite development review, subdivision staff, and then if there's a particular issue that we can see with an application, staff that would be associated with handling that issue. So for example, if a project might have parking issues or issues related to historic preservation, we'll also invite transportation staff or historic staff to attend this pre-application meeting. The overall benefit here is really that feedback you're getting from staff. Tightening up an application prior to submittal can really streamline that development review process and prevent any holdups from acceptance of the application or further delays of the planning board's 70-day review period. At the end of these meetings, the development review staff will assign a case number and provide information for the necessary informational mailers to begin the submittal process. Next slide, please. Can you go back one more? Thanks. Oh, one more. Sorry, 2 slides forward from this one. It's called concurrent review. Staggering Entitlements. Thank you. Okay.
Is this the one?
No, it's called Staggering Entitlements. Following slide.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks. So we typically advise clients who need multiple public entitlements to stagger these entitlements in a way that condenses the overall review period. Typically, this applies for cases that require preliminary plan of subdivision approval and a detailed site plan approval. Alone, a preliminary plan process can take approximately 8 to 11 months from the initiation of necessary plans and studies through development review and then a final planning board hearing. A detailed site plan typically takes the same amount of time with a little bit more time on the back end in case the district council reviews the planning board's decision. Staggering entitlements in the county essentially means lining up those entitlement processes so that they're about 3 to 4 weeks apart from each other, from submittal to development review and then the final hearing. This pretty much condenses those individual 8 to 11 month periods into one overall 12 to 15 month process. This has great timing benefits and cost benefits for our clients, and we really see a lot of efficiencies with staggering and condensing that overall timeline. Next slide, please. Another important consideration right now is adapting to the virtual land use process in the county. The planning board didn't miss a beat last year with the start of the pandemic in March and adapted right to a go-to meeting forum for all of their meetings. Development review transitioned to Microsoft Teams, and the county council has held meetings on go-to meeting throughout the pandemic. Next slide, please. So in addition to that pre-application meeting taking place online, development review meetings with staff are all virtual right now. The virtual master planning process and the countywide map amendment process has been conducted online, and there's no real timeline right now for going back to in-person. So it's important to get used to, or at least familiar with, the virtual process. The most important consideration here is probably just the familiarity with the virtual rules of procedure and registration requirements for online meetings and hearings. Right now, the county council requires submission of required materials and registration by 3 p.m. the day before a meeting. And the planning board is requiring registration and submittal of exhibits and materials by noon on the Tuesday before a Thursday hearing. Neither of those bodies have made exceptions to those timelines. So again, it's just really important to stay on top of those timelines and be familiar with the rules of procedure. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Stacy to talk about a recent case study with a client of ours in Lanham.
So next slide, please. So what we wanted to do, and you can go to the next slide as well. We wanted to talk a little bit about basically application of some of these development processes that we've just talked about. This one we chose because it combines both a subdivision or preliminary plan process as well as a special exception. And it's a little unique because it really implements a lot of the various outreaches that have been mentioned today, and kind of talks about how to build a successful case even when there are challenges. So CVS was looking to build a new store. The existing building that was on this site was an older medical office building that was had seen better days, and we were applying under a use category that really was for department and variety stores that applied to uses broader than just a CVS, but it was the category that we needed to apply under for this zone. And as we were beginning to delve into that research, we realized that there were a couple of criteria, including a setback requirement of 50 feet. The building had to be set back 50 feet from the adjacent street, as well as access. We had to have access to an arterial road. And we realized that we were not going to be able to meet these two regulatory requirements, which meant that we would need to seek a variance. So what that told us was that we were going to have to go to the planning board for our subdivision and get approval from the planning board on our subdivision. But we were going to also get feedback from the planning board on our special exception and variance. But we were going to then have to take that to the hearing examiner on the special exception. This was because we realized that there was going to be a lot of complexities, and because of the area in which this property was located, we did extensive community outreach, working with local civic associations, adjacent and confronting property owners, local churches, and we really began to build our support network for this proposed use and our advocates for this proposed use. We work closely with staff And we got to a point where everybody thought this was the right use, the right building for this property. But we had an issue, again, of needing a variance from a regulatory requirement. And the challenge with when you're in a situation where you need to seek a variance is that it's a very high standard of review. You need to prove that your property is unique and that uniqueness is different than any other property in the area. And you need to prove that there's a hardship, and that hardship can't be self-created. Maryland courts have really very stringently looked at these requirements. So as we were reviewing this and discussing this with staff, we realized that staff was not going to be able to support our variance request, which meant that we were going to go to the planning board with a recommendation of denial for this proposed use. And as James and I'm sure John too can attest, that's never a pleasant place to be. It's never a place we want to be. We always work hand in hand with staff to try to avoid that. But sometimes you have a situation just like this where everybody wants something to occur, but you are going to need, again, a variance to be able to make that happen. So what we realized that we needed to do beyond what we had done through the review process was to build a very strong case to take to the planning board. And we really dug into the research and to looking at how this specific property was created to show its uniqueness. So by way of example, we dug into the prior lotting pattern of this property and how this property came to be the shape that it was. We went back over 100 years and examined how land basically had to be conveyed away from this property to create surrounding roads. We had our engineer look at surveying to see what the grade was of the property, and we realized that there was some grade changes on this property that resulted in kind of a bowl effect on the land, which really dictated where our building envelope could be located. And combined, we were able to show that the property was really unique. We also showed that if you had to comply with these setback and this access requirement, the size of the CVS would be so small that CVS would not, they've never built a store that's that size and would not build it in this area. So in the end, the planning board did find that, basically reviewed the whole case. They reviewed our justification of the variance, and they did find that we met the requirements of the code because of the uniqueness of the property as well as the hardship that would be suffered. Again, it took a lot of effort on everyone's part, but to John's point, we really did our homework before we got to that point to hopefully set ourselves up so that when we got to the planning board, we had the best facts before us and legal arguments so that we were able to give the planning board the tools they needed to approve the proposed project. So I guess with that, we just want to say thank you all very much for having us today. We are thrilled to be here with John and James at Economic Development Corporation, and we all are here to answer any questions that you have.
Yes, thank you all very much. This was a great presentation by all the speakers. We really appreciate everybody's insight and their different perspectives. So I know that we had several questions in the Q&A, so I'll go ahead and start asking some of those. Somebody was asking about the change of land use, a change in zoning. Is it truly an 8 to 10 month process? Is that an accurate timeline?
Yes, it's a typical, and the reason why that is because there's so many parties that are involved, and also there are notice requirements for the public because you have to provide them notice to let them know of a zoning change. That is a huge change, and so everyone needs to be aware of what's going on because it potentially impacts transportation issues related to environmental issues, a slew of other things as well. Even when you're talking sewer and water service area changes, all that stuff can be spawned all because of a zoning map amendment change. So there's a lot of analysis and review that takes place during that time period. So that's the reason why, and also coordination efforts. That's a big thing too, because not only within our other agencies here within park and planning, but we're having to coordinate with the state. We're having to coordinate with other county agencies too. So that 8 to 10 month process is a typical process timeframe on average. Sometimes it could take more, but the only reason why it would take more is because on the applicant side, they want to kind of take more time to get their reviews and their, not only the reviews, I should say, more so their information, their plans and stuff together. So that's the only other thing.
And thank you very much for that answer. And this is the important thing, and one of the reasons why we wanted to cover this topic, as well as permitting and zoning and site selection. It's so important to go to a site that's hopefully already properly zoned for what you're intending to use it for. If you're building a development, to again be working through the processes in the way that you need to do the subdivisions or other things along those lines. But we wanted people to understand that there is time, and time, equals money in business. And so it's important for business owners to understand what an actual timeline may be so that they can plan accordingly. And that's really what our Pathway series is all about, is helping to try and provide some of that guidance to the public, because it may not be understood or known. One of the other questions was based on recommendations, does the county has received, or personal observations, other specific businesses, corporations, or land use development types that are currently being encouraged, sought for Prince George's County. And I would just say that there is an economic development strategy. And yes, we are always seeking to bring in businesses and help local businesses expand into proper areas. And John, I don't know if you want to expand anything farther there from an economic development standpoint.
Sure, thank you, Alicia. As you've mentioned, we have actually brought in a consulting team to do our economic development strategy. So based on all the information that we provide to them in terms of what we think we're good at, and our core competencies as a county in terms of our labor force, the infrastructure that's in place to attract certain industry sectors. Based on all that information, they put together a brand new strategy for us that should be public within the next few months, a public document that we've been working on for over a year. And that will give the public all the information about what we're really, from a sales standpoint, what we're going after, what we're good at. And some of those industries you've already seen us really be successful in attracting. Many of you don't probably know this or haven't noticed this, but you've probably seen a lot of Amazon distribution facilities that have come out of the ground within the last 18 months, several 100,000 square feet of space, Amazon distribution. Warehouse distribution is not your, as they say, grandmother's warehouse distribution industry as it used to be. It's very technical. You have to be able to have those technology skills to work in some of these operations. So those jobs have changed a little bit. The skill sets have changed as automation and innovation have really taken over in warehouse distribution. We also have just adopted some new legislation that will allow us to attract data centers. And we're very excited about that, bringing in a lot of those operations here in close proximity to Washington, D.C. We have not really been pursuing that over the years as much as we could because of the zoning issues. But now that we've got the new legislation and planning has worked with us on that, as well as DPI, we're able to go after some of these big data center operations to bring in. Subsequent to building this new several, I think it's $750 million hospital or research medical center that just opened several months ago. We're able to attract now medical operations. We have new medical office buildings that are going up that will support the new medical center. We have a lot of doctors groups and medical industry sector related businesses that are wanting to come into Prince George's County to be close to the hospital and being a part of that whole exciting industry growth within the county. We're transforming medical health services within the county subsequent to bringing on that beautiful operation there at the medical center. And so you'll see very shortly some really tall office buildings going in with focus on medical center. You've also seen probably down at National Harbor, there has been the medical pavilion, 2 office buildings, 100,000 square feet that focus primarily on specialized healthcare that we have attracted. And so you look at medical, you look at transportation distribution, you look at data center, you look at technology industry sectors, you look at aerospace. You look at innovative manufacturing. That's not your traditional factory, but using computers to manufacture goods and provide those goods to and services all over the country, being done right here in Prince George's County. So we're growing. We're being more innovative all the time. We're excited about the future. The strategy plan that's coming out very shortly will very fine detail outline all that we are, as I say, going after. And we feel very, very positive about that endeavor. So I'm glad that was a great question. I'm glad that was asked.
Yep.
Always excited to talk about that.
Yes, and our team will also be going to the ICSC conference coming up. So again, we know that retail and restaurants are of interest to our community, and that is also an area where we are having a focused and concerted effort to support. James, one of the questions that came in was about zoning and how to identify a business type and the proper type of zoning that it may be. Is there a tool that you can point to from planning and zoning that the public might want to know more about?
For right now in the existing ordinance, a little more difficult to find, but what I will suggest is that you reach out to our planning information services team. And the reason why I say that is because we have, within planning and zoning, there are what we call base zones. And then there are also overlay zones, where a base zone may not permit a particular use in a zone. However, when the county council or the district council has adopted a particular overlay zone, it may allow that use within that zone. So what I would suggest is that you reach out to our planning information services team. And what I'll do is I'll put their email address in the chat so everyone can have that information and send them an email and they can look into it. A lot of times what they do prefer is if you find a property first, then they can do the research on that. Because we have like hundreds, or actually a lot of, I should say hundreds, but a lot of different zones, but hundreds of different uses that are out there that we'll have to go through and research. Because a lot of times when we get the clarification from you all on what the use is going to be, it may fall under something else within the ordinance. And so they'll need to do that research to find that out to kind of fit you in a particular zone. So I'll go ahead and put their information in the chat so you all have that. And if you have, if you have any questions, definitely reach out to me. Okay.
Alicia, I was just going to add, kind of from those of us who've used the services of both James's staff as well as your staff at EDC. For those that are listening today, these are invaluable resources. James and his staff are incredible at providing details in terms of what is the best kind of zone to move forward in, the overlay zone that he mentioned. Is there kind of a creative option in which to move forward with a specific use? On the EDC perspective, again, we have come in early with one of our institutional clients and met with many of your folks and David Iannucci to really get a team together before we even got into the process of getting to park and planning and potentially, the council review. So you guys, there is a wonderful resource that you're seeing on the screen today at the county and park and planning. So highly encourage everyone to use those tools.
Thank you for that. And I guess one of the other questions, and I'm just going to throw this out there, if there was one tip or lesson learned from another experience, on ways to make the process move more smoothly and to not cost yourself time needlessly, is there something that you would recommend or lessons learned that you've seen others? And again, I want to point out that during COVID, everything did go online. And so there may be other things, James, that you want to point to too, that are online tools that the public can use now that were not maybe there previously.
Absolutely. I will say one of the biggest things, I will say this just to be honest, do not sign a lease or get any type of legal agreement without contacting our team. It's important to do so because once you get locked in, then that's it. And then a lot of times what we hear back is a lot of these small businesses are wanting us to kind of work with them after they've already signed this lease and gotten to a legal agreement with the property owner, and it's too late. And there's nothing that we can do on our end, unfortunately. But I strongly suggest, I've said this my entire career to a lot of small businesses, do your due diligence as much as possible. Our team, like what Stacy and Vincent were talking about earlier, what Alicia said, what John has said, reach out to us. That's what we're here for. Planning Information Services, they're there for that information. If they can't find the information, they're going to look to somebody who can, because we want to get you the answer. We don't want you signing a lease and then be caught up with that property owner on a property, because we had that recently where someone had signed a lease. Just like I gave the example earlier of it was a small grocery store in Fort Washington, and they signed the lease, and unfortunately they had to get a non-conforming use, and we couldn't support that non-conforming use going in because they couldn't provide the information to indicate that they had been in operation for 18 months. So anyway, I strongly suggest, again, that's the biggest thing out of all of this. Do your due diligence. If you need to contact us, contact us. If we can't help you on our end, we'll try to find somebody who can help you out, okay? And also all those different tools that John Mason was talking about earlier, PG Atlas, that is the biggest tool out there that we have, in addition to the zoning ordinance itself. But PG Atlas, like he said, it has a slew of layers on there, 40 plus layers on there that provides a lot of detailed information on properties throughout the county. And so they have that information, even if it relates to an overlay zone, it'll tell you there's an overlay zone that's out there, and it'll send you right to the zoning ordinance where all that information is applicable. So all that is at your fingertips. So please use those resources. We have an incredible team. I will blow my head up because I love my team. I love what Park and Planning does. We do a great job of providing a lot of information and resources to the community, and we also are making sure that we are available to you to make sure you don't make those bad decisions at any point in time. So thank you. That's all I would say on that. But yeah, definitely we have a slew of resources out there for you.
Would the team from Lerch Brewer like to add any lessons learned or any tips that you might provide?
I think we completely agree with James. I mean, do your homework, do your homework, do your homework before you acquire the property and before you apply basically your application to do the development at Park and Planning. The more time you spend in the beginning digging into a site and understanding the site, understanding the process, the more time you will save in the end, and the more likely you will be successful in getting that necessary approval.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think coordination with staff too throughout that entire process on the front end is really important, and creates a ton of time saving on the back end.
Thank you. Thank you all so very much. This has been a great program. I will just mention that one of our first sessions in the Pathways series that was sponsored by Lerch Brewer, again, covered site selection, and we went into great detail about site selection, that process, demographics, things that business owners should be looking into, understanding, who is your target customer? Is this a good location for you? Is it properly zoned for your use, etc. So please take a look. That session along with this session are recorded and available, will be available to the public to view later. And I think without any further ado, I think that we've answered most of the questions in the chat and otherwise. So I think.
I was going to say, hello?
Yes.
I was going to make one last point. Great answers from our guest. Please remember that the Economic Development Corporation is the front door. There's a lot of great information that has been disseminated today. Some of it you may have not fully understood, but come to us first. Call us, set up an appointment. Let's meet with you virtually or in person. And you can ask every possible question that you need to. There is no bad questions, but use the front door. Just come into the EDC, allow us to set you up so that when you get with these experts, you're already loaded with a lot of good information and can speak, very intelligently on what you're trying to achieve. We're here, we're nice people, and we get all kinds of questions all day long, and we love working with our businesses. So please remember, we're the front door. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And on that note, I guess we'll end today's program. Thank you all to everybody, to James, Stacy, Vincent, John. Thank you all. What a great program. And to our attendees, thank you for being here and sharing your morning with us. Take care, everybody. We'll see you November 18th or December 9th. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.